Full screen tayo and earphones on. Good morning, IP number 3. Morton Company's contribution format, income statement for last month is given below. You have here sales 15,000 units at 30 pesos per unit for 50,000. Contribution margin of 135,000, fixed expenses of 90, net operating income of 45,000. The industry in which the company operates is quite sensitive to cyclical movements in economy. Thus, profits vary considerably from year to year according to general economic conditions. The company has a large amount of unused capacity and is studying ways of improving profits. Number 1, new equipment has come onto the market that would allow the company to automate a portion of its operations. Variable costs would be reduced by 9 pesos per unit. However, fixed costs would increase to a total of 225,000 each month. So, pakidagdagan na lang ng 0 dito. Nagkulang tayo ng 0 each month. Prepare 2 contribution format income statements, one showing present operations and one showing how operations would appear if the new equipment is purchased. So, for number 1, we are required to present 2 statements. Dugtong na lang natin dito to adapt this data that is given in the problem. This is the present condition, wherein 450,000 is the amount of your total sales, and as given, the per unit price is 30 and it is 100%, of course, being the base. This one would be 315,000 divided by 15,000 units. I think it is 21. Yes, it is. Alright. Deducted from 30, this must be 9. The variable cost ratio is 70, 21 over 30 pesos, and 9 over 30 necessarily should be 30%. Under the proposal, okay, so we call this the proposed. The following should appear as required by number 1. The total sales, of course, would still be 450,000. The selling price is still at 30 pesos and 100%. The variable cost would be reduced by 9, so this becomes 12 pesos, and accordingly, this must be 180,000. 270,000 should be your contribution margin, with the 12 representing 40% of the total. Accordingly, your CM percentage must be 60%. Alright? So, this one must be 18 pesos. Our fixed cost, ang sabi dito, alright, would increase to, alright, 225,000. So, 225,000 deducted from 270, this one would be 45,000. So, I think that satisfied requirement number 1 already. Alright? Okay. Number 2, refer to the income statements that we have prepared in number 1 above. For both present and proposed new operations, compute number 2, letter A, the degree of operating leverage. B, break-even point in pesos. C, margin of safety in both peso and percentage terms. So, madali na lang itong number 2. Gawa tayong dalawang columns for the present condition and the proposed. Alright? So, under present condition and under the proposed, for number 2, for the problem as a whole actually, we would be computing letter A, that is degree of operating leverage. So, 135,000 under the present, I should say, divided by 45,000 operating profit. Ilan tayo doon? That must be 3. Okay? This is your letter A. Under the proposal naman, that would be 270,000. Okay? Pagkasahin na natin kung saan tayo pwedeng magsulat. Divided by 45,000. Formula for your DOL, degree of operating leverage. Tama? Contribution margin divided by the operating profit. So this must be 6. Okay? We have satisfied number 2A. For number 2B naman, break-even point in pesos. So for break-even point in pesos, due to lack of space, di na natin susulatin, yung final answer na lang kaagad. That is your total fixed cost. For the present condition, it must be 90,000 divided by, since pesos yan, it must be the CM percentage of 30. So 90,000 divided by 30%, this must be 300,000 pesos. For the proposal, it must be 225,000 divided by 60%. That must be, could you please check? 375,000. Alright? That satisfies letter B. Letter C naman tayo. Letter C, margin of safety, both pesos and percentage. So margin of safety is computed by your expected or actual sales less the break-even sales. So 450,000 less the break-even 300,000. In pesos, it must be 150,000. In percentage or in ratio, it is 1/3 for the present condition. Under the proposed condition, syempre, didak-didak lang, wala namang mahirap pa sa ginagawa natin. 450,000 less the 375,000. That must be 75,000. In ratio, it is 1/6 to be exact. Okay. Kung gusto mong i-convert sa percentage, di madali lang naman. That is our number 2 requirement. Alright? Number 3, maluwag pala dito sa baba. Refer again to the data in number 1 above. As a manager, what factors would be paramount in your mind in deciding whether to purchase the new equipment? Assume that ample funds are available to make the purchase. So, ano daw ba yung ibang considerations natin as a manager? So, this is number 3. Strong economic conditions. Yan. Sulat natin kahit mahirap. Better with the equipment. Bakit? As a matter of interpreting the results dito with regards to break-even results, with regards our degree of operating leverage and our margin of safety, we come to the conclusion that with strong economic conditions, we will be better with the equipment. Consequently, if there is economic recession, pasensya na kayo sa sulat, medyo mahirap, economic recession, opposite lang, worse with the equipment. So to further our conclusion, aside from these two, the company must therefore decide whether the opportunity or potential for generating greater profits is worth the risk. So, ang evaluation, nasa company talaga yan. But for us, as the manager, we are not in the real situation. Ang dami kasing other considerations pa. But we can conclude these two for sure. So, isulat natin, ultimately, the company must decide whether the potential to earn greater profits is worth the risk of incurring losses assuming downturn yung economy. Okay? Number 4, refer to the original data. Rather than purchase new equipment, the marketing manager is thinking about changing the company's marketing strategy. Rather than pay sales commission, which are currently included in variable expenses, the company would pay salespersons fixed salaries and would invest heavily in advertising. The marketing manager claims that this new approach would increase unit sales by 30% without any change in the selling price. The company's new monthly fixed expenses would be 180,000 and its net operating income would increase by 20%. Compute, number 1, break-even point in pesos for the company under the new marketing strategy. Number 2, do you agree with the marketing manager's proposal? So, let us check. Okay, so for number 4, 15,000 units times 1.30 due to the 30% increase, okay, in the unit sales times the unchanged selling price per unit, sabi niya dito, without any change in selling price, should give you a total sales of 585,000. That is your sales. Less the variable cost, contribution margin is equal to your fixed cost, then you have your income. Alright? Ilan yung magiging variable cost natin dito? To be safe, fill in muna natin yung mga data na alam na natin. Ano pa ba yung sinabi dyan? Ang sabi, its net operating income would increase by 20% if you do so. So, ilan ba yung ating net operating income currently? It is at 45,000. So, increase it by 20%. 45,000 times 20%. Ilan tayo doon? This must be 54,000. Ano pa sabi? The new monthly fixed expenses would be 180. Yan ang sabi. Therefore, by working upwards, literally, 180,000. This one must be 234,000. Accordingly, iipitin mo lang yung variable cost. This is therefore 351,000. So, hindi sinabi sa atin, pero yung variable cost per unit natin nagbago. Okay? Nagbago. Kasi, binago yung mix ng cost structure nagbago yung fixed cost, so yung ating variable cost, particularly yung fixed cost, tumaas. So ang tendency, yung variable cost, bababa. Alright? 15,000 units times 1.30 is actually 19,500 units. So 351,000 divided by 19,500, lumalabas yung ating variable cost per unit under the new cost structure would be 18 pesos. Alright, this one would be our response to number 4. Alright, ibig sabihin, ang ating break-even point for number 4, in units ba tanong? In pesos ang tanong. Break-even point in pesos would be 180,000, that is your total fixed cost, divided by our contribution margin percentage, which must be 234,000 over the 585,000. I think that is 40%. So our break-even point in pesos should be 450,000. Meron pa sa number 4. Do you agree with the marketing manager's proposal? Well, it all depends talaga dun sa strategy ng company, because as we have shown in our solution here, oo nga, totoo, tumaas from 45,000 yung income to 54,000. However, may kabalikat naman yun na pagtaas ng risk. Why? As evidenced simply, okay, by the break-even analysis here, the break-even in peso sales went up to 450,000. Silipin natin, ilan ba yung sa number 2 natin kanina? 450,000 as compared dun sa present condition, which is only, I think it is 300,000. Ito, requirement number 2, break-even in pesos, 300,000 lang siya. Accordingly, mas madami kang sisisirin para mag-break-even point. Alright? So, when it comes to income, yes, higher yung return, pero higher din yung risk. The higher the return, the higher the risk. That is our response to number 4. Okay? IP number 4. Michael Cage Incorporated makes a high-quality wooden birdhouse that sells for 20 pesos per unit. Variable costs are 8 per unit, and fixed costs total 180,000 per year. Requirements: answer the following independent questions. Number 1. Due to an increase in demand, the company estimates that sales will increase by 75,000 during the year. By how much should net income increase or net loss decrease, assuming that fixed costs do not have change? So for number 1, isulat na lang natin dito. Our selling price is 20 pesos. Our variable cost is at 8. Contribution margin is therefore 12 pesos per unit, and it is 60%. 75,000 increase in the sales will provide you therefore 60% of it as contribution margin. Ilan tayo doon? 45,000 increase in contribution margin, and at the same time, it is also an increase in income. The fixed cost here is no longer a consideration since we are working with the incremental data. Alright? The fixed cost will be borne by the main data. Ito, dagdag lang na data. Whether or not there is the increase of 75,000, the fixed cost will still be incurred. Ang papasan nun yung dating operations. Okay? Yung 180,000. 2. Assume that operating results for last year were sales 400,000, less variable expenses 160, CM of 240,000, net income of 60,000. Compute the degree of operating leverage at the current level of sales. At this level, contribution margin is at 240,000 divided by the operating income of 60,000. Your DOL is 4 times the degree of operating leverage. Number 3. The President expects sales to increase by 20% next year. By what percentage should net income increase? Sabi natin, na-discuss na natin to the last time. The DOL serves as the link between your topmost portion, the sales, and the bottommost portion of the income statement, your net income. So without even preparing a complete income statement, you'd be able to reflect or to know ano yung magiging effect ng percentage change sa sales on income. For yung ating DOL, 20% increase would translate to 80% also increase sa income. So that is our response for number 3, 80%. Number 4, refer to the original data. Assume that the company sold 18,000 units last year. Sabi dyan, 18,000 15,000 units last year. The sales manager is convinced that a 10% reduction in the selling price combined with a 25% increase in advertising would cause annual sales in units to increase by 1/3. Compute the amount of income first, sabi niya, before the proposed change and then after the change is implemented. So, class, ibig sabihin, pinipwersa tayo rito na gumawa ng dalawang income statements. First before and then after. So, for number 4, selling price of 20. Ulitin lang natin sinulat natin kanina. Variable cost of 8 and a contribution margin of 12 times, according to the problem, it sold 18,000 units last year, so 18,000. The total CM should be 216,000. With a fixed cost of, could you please check, ilan yung ating fixed cost? 180,000 last year. The income must be, mabilis lang naman, 36,000. Isa pa, selling price of 20 times 0.90 kasi i-reduce daw natin yung selling price by 10% and see what will be the effect. This becomes 18 pesos less variable cost which is still the same. A reduction in the selling price without any movement in the variable cost ultimately translates to a reduction in the contribution margin. So this becomes 10 times, ang sabi, pagka ginawa mo yan, tataas by 1/3 yung ating unit sales. So yung dating 18,000, it becomes 24,000. That is 18,000 times 1 and 1/3. So it becomes 24,000. This one therefore is 240,000. Less your fixed cost here, which would increase according to the problem, yung 180,000 natin originally, alright, madadagdagan ng 25,000, that is the increase in advertising. So it becomes 205,000. 240,000 less 205,000, 35,000. So ano ibig sabihin yan? Pagka ginawa mo tong number 4, yung proposal ng sales manager, there will be a 1,000 peso decrease in income from 36,000 decrease of 1,000 pesos to 35,000. Again, what we have done here is the total approach. It would be more convenient and much more efficient pagka ang ginamit natin, as we have introduced in the previous problem, ay incremental approach. Dapat, sabi natin before, masanay mo na yan. So let us embrace all the consequences, the effects of the proposal in number 4. If and when you decrease your selling price by 10%, 10% is 2 pesos, I think. Could you please check? Yes, it is 2 pesos. Kasi yung 20 magiging 18. Then you will lose 2 pesos bawat isa dun sa currently nabibenta mo na 18,000 units. Ilan yun? 36,000. Losing a contribution margin of 36,000 is a disadvantage. We mark it letter D to signify that it has a disadvantageous effect. Alright? A decrease in the selling price translates to a decrease in contribution margin pag hindi naman nagbago yung variable cost. So, 36,000 disadvantage yun. Ano pa yung ibang effect? You will incur an additional 25,000 pesos which you would not incur should you not take this approach or should you not take this proposal. Increase in fixed cost, disadvantage uli yan. We mark it letter D again. However, yung 18,000 units na nabibenta mo before becomes 24,000. Therefore, there is a new contribution margin brought about by those new number of units. New contribution margin in the amount of additional 6,000 units na makapagbibigay sa'yo ng 10 pesos bawat isa yung new contribution margin mo. So, ilan ito? Necessarily, this must be 60,000 and it is a new CM advantage yan. Ibig sabihin, pag pinagbunggo-bunggo mo yung mga advantage versus the disadvantage, I should say, versus the advantage, you have here 1,000 peso disadvantage, which is exactly the same as our computation in the total approach. Okay? Huwag mong ipilit therefore na gawin yung proposal sa number 4 lest you suffer 1,000 decrease in income. Number 5. Refer to the original data. Assume again that the company sold 18,000 units last year. The president does not want to change the selling price naman. Instead, he wants to increase sales commission by 1 peso per unit. He thinks that this move, combined with some increase in advertising, would increase annual sales by 25,000. By how much could advertising be increased? Palagyan mo na lang ng letter D. Be increased. With profits remaining unchanged. Do not prepare an income statement. Use the incremental approach. So, ininsirakan na tayo, sanayin mo na daw talaga yung ating incremental approach. Very advantageous kasi yan, class, pagka nasanay mo. Mabilis, so time efficient ka. Dito sa ating number 5, we evaluate again the consequences. Alright? Ayaw niyang baguhin yung sales, pero i-increase naman daw niya yung commission by 1 peso. That is variable cost. So, without changing the sales, increasing the variable cost means decreasing the contribution margin by the same amount. Decrease in contribution margin, that is 1 peso. Okay? Mababawasan ka ng piso bawat isa dun sa currently nabibenta mo na 18,000 units. That would be an 18,000 disadvantage. Kanina dito, 1,000 disadvantage. Ibig sabihin, ultimately, the decision, wag mong ituloy yung proposal. Dito naman, tignan natin. Ano pa yung ibang effect? Tulad kanina, the number of units would increase. However, this time, the increase would be 25%. So, 18,000 units, compute muna tayo, 18,000 units times 25%, ilan yung increase? That would be 4,500 unit increase na magbibigay sa'yo ng ilan? Selling price, this time is the same, 20. Variable cost is now 8 plus 1, so 9 yon. Therefore, the contribution margin here would be 11. Alright? So, 11 times 4,500 will be your new contribution margin as brought about by the implementation of the proposal in number 5. Ibig sabihin, this one would be 49,500 advantage. Obviously, implementing this change or proposal would be beneficial 31,500 advantage. Should you wish to play with the numbers, sige, prepare ka ng two separate income statements. Then i-check mo. The difference must be an advantage or increase by implementing the proposal 31,500. IP number 5. Neptune Company produces toys and other items for use in beach and resort areas. A small inflatable toy has come onto the market that the company is anxious to produce and sell. The new toy will sell for 3 pesos per unit. Enough capacity exists in the company's plant to produce 16,000 units of the toy each month. Variable cost to manufacture and sell 1 unit is 125 peso, 1.25 should I say. And fixed costs associated with the toy would total 35,000 per month. The company's marketing department predicts that demand for the new toy will exceed the 16,000 units the company is able to produce. Hindi problema yan. Additional manufacturing space can be rented from another company at a fixed cost of 1,000 per month. Variable cost in the rented facility is 1.40 due to somewhat less efficient operations in the plant. So, dalawa yung ating cost structure dito na pinipresent. Una, yung manufacturing costs dun sa ating own facility, which would have 1.25, alright, and 35,000 per month. Kaso hanggang 16,000 lang ang kakayanan. Eto, sa rented facility naman, dahil tini-expect daw 16,000, more than 16,000 yung ating maproproduce, ay 1.40 yung ating variable cost due to somewhat less efficient operations, sabi dyan. Siyempre, tataas din yung fixed cost kasi, siyempre, rented facility yun additional 1,000 per month. So, number 1. Compute the monthly break-even point for the new toy in units and in total sales pesos. So for number 1, selling price of 3 pesos variable cost of 1.25 or a contribution margin of 1.75. We are presenting first here, dimension, two structures dun sa ating own facility. Under the rented facility naman, 3 pesos pa rin ang selling price. But the variable cost is 1.40. Okay, erase muna natin saglit. Medyo pangit pagkakasulat. Contribution margin there would be lower, of course, 1.60. So if you expect to produce more than 16,000 units, medyo may komplikasyon ng konti. Why? Because this figure would be the contribution margin on the first, okay, 16,000 units. And this one would be the contribution margin on units above the 16,000, first 16,000 units. So there's a little bit of complication. Konti lang naman. Since the fixed cost for the first 16,000 units is 35,000. Dividing 35,000 by the 1.75, alright, ito yung 1.75 natin, gives you 20,000 units. Na ano ba yan? Break-even point in units. Now, what does this signify? It means an inconsistency in the solution. Ibig sabihin, invalid at hindi mo pwedeng gamitin yung 35,000 na fixed cost lang. Ibig sabihin, kailangan magpunta ka talaga dun sa rented facility. Kasi, tignan mo to, sinasabi mo na ito yung structure, fixed cost, ng 16,000 units. Sinasabi mo na ito yung contribution margin ng 16,000 units. But the break-even point na tinutukoy or result nitong equation na to ay 20,000 units, which is in excess of the 16,000 units. Therefore, this signifies that we really have to go to the rented facility and produce more than 16,000 units para man lang maka-break-even. Tama? Okay. Therefore, 16,000 would not be sufficient. And the following solution is necessary. 35,000 plus 1,000, na-resolve na natin kanina that we cannot employ our own capacity only and we would have to rent. Kaya hindi 35,000 yung fixed cost natin, bagkus 36,000. At the break-even point na requirement ng number 1, the income must be 0. Which means to say that the fixed cost exactly is covered by the contribution margin. Total contribution margin must therefore be 36,000 also. Exactly covering the fixed cost. Ngayon, yung 36,000 na yun, manggagaling sa dalawang sources. Una, dun sa first 16,000 units. Alright? Na magbibigay sa'yo ng 1.75 bawat isa. Right? This is 16,000 units times 1.75. 28,000 yon. Tama? Our solution format is the CM format income statement lang eh. So, kung 36 yung ating total CM, ibig sabihin, there is this certain 8,000 portion that is over and above the 16,000 units. That each of it would give you 1.6. Lumalabas, 5,000 units therefore ito. Okay? 8,000 divided by 1.60 would be 5,000 units. So, to break even and to satisfy requirement number 1, our final answer should be 21,000 units. Ito yung final answer natin. Okay, number 2. How many units must be sold each month to make a profit of 12,000 pesos? So, madali lang. Same procedure. Except that, nagbigay siya ng 12,000. So, i-insert mo lang yon as an additional info. Contribution margin. Yan. Fixed cost. And then income. 12,000 daw ang gusto. The fixed cost has been resolved already, not to be 35, but 36,000. 12, 36,000, 48,000. Since this is 36, it is above, the units that we're talking about here is above 16,000 units. Ibig sabihin, yung first 28,000 nitong 48, first 28,000, na galing, ayun po 28,000. Ayan, 28,000. na galing doon sa first 16,000 units, okay, ay part ng 48. Therefore, the other portion must be 20,000 pesos. And that 20,000 pesos, divide it by, saan? Ito, 1.60. Kasi this is over and above the 16,000 units. Divided by 1.60. Ilan tayo dito? This must be 12,500. In addition, dun sa first 16,000 units na nagbigay nga sa'yo ng 28,000. So, 16,000 units plus 12,500. This must be 28,500 units. Final answer in requirement number 2. 28,500. Okay? Okay. Number 3. Tsaga-tsaga lang class ha. Makakaraos din. Pasasaan din ba magiging CPA ka? If the sales manager receives a bonus of 0.10 for each unit sold in excess of the break-even point, how many units must be sold each month to earn a return of 25% on the monthly investment in fixed costs? Just the same. Kaso medyo complicated lang ng konti because of the 0.10 commission for the sales manager above the break-even point. So, tignan natin ha. Erase muna akong konti rito. Okay. Okay, so for number 3, selling price, variable cost, you have your contribution margin, fixed cost, and then we have our income. Income, ilan ba gusto niya sa income? Sabi niya, 25% on the investment in fixed cost. Fixed cost is 36,000. This must be 9,000. Fixed cost, 36,000. 9,000, 36,000. Contribution margin, 45,000. 45,000 manggagaling sa iba't ibang sources. Alright? So it has been resolved already that 16,000, the first 16,000 will bring you 28,000 pesos in contribution margin. So this is 28,000 from the first 16,000 units. Okay? Ano pa? 8,000 pesos comes from how many number of units? It comes from 5,000 units. Sir, bakit na naman yan? Eh, di ba na-resolve na natin yan? Ito, okay? Kanina, dito. 8,000 divided by 1.6. Ilan na nga ba yung nandyan? This is 5,000, correct? 5,000. Yan yung 5,000 natin. 16,000 at 5,000 to make up the break-even point. Yan yung break-even point natin. So, 45,000, 28,000 pesos. Pesos to mga to. Manggagaling dun sa first 16,000. Now, to make up the break-even point, which is 21,000. Alright? 21,000. I've just been reminded, yung number 1 yata, ang tanong sa atin ay in units and in total pesos. So, nakaligtaan natin. Later, we go back to that. Okay? I'm sorry. Units lang yata nasagot natin doon. Anyway, let's continue first with number 3. So, the 16,000 and the 5,000 make up the break-even point, which is 21,000 units. Alright? 16 at saka 5 dito. Ibig sabihin, yung natitira dito, 45 less 28 less 8, ilan yon? 9,000 pesos. Class, tatlong cost structure na ang pinag-uusapan natin sa number 3. Why? Yung una, 16,000 dito, yun yung sa ating own plant. Yan yung capacity ng ating own manufacturing plant. Yung additional 5,000 above the 16,000, 1.6 na, hindi 1.75 ang ating contribution margin. Above that, magbabago uli yung ating variable cost due to the addition of 0.10 variable cost per unit. Yan yung commission dun sa sales manager. Ibig sabihin, itong cost structure na pangatlo dito is 0.10 lesser than 1.6. It means to say, eto ay 1.5. So, divide this by 1.5. Are you following? Dito sa pangatlo, it is above the break-even point of 21,000, which means to say, the variable cost would increase by 0.10, that is the commission, it is a variable cost, and accordingly, the contribution margin would decrease by the same amount. Ibig sabihin, 1.5 na lang yung contribution margin dito. And this signifies 6,000 units. Alright? Ibig sabihin, you have to sell 27,000 units. Final answer dito sa ating requirement number 3 to satisfy yung gusto ng number 3 na 25,000 return on the monthly investment in fixed cost. Okay, now let's go back dun sa ating number 1. Nakalimutan natin. Sa number 1 natin, ano ba yung tanong sa number 1? 21,000, eto po tayo, yung ating break even point in units. So, simply, dahil gusto niya in pesos din, you simply multiply that by 3 pesos, yung ating selling price. So, again, this one would be 63,000 pesos. Answer in number 1, 21,000 units, 63,000 pesos. Alright? IP number 6. Rogers Construction builds steel structures for commercial and industrial customers. The buildings are various shapes and sizes, with the average price being 30 pesos per square foot and the average variable cost of 18 per square foot. The annual fixed costs are 5 million pesos. Requirements. Answer each of the following questions independently. Number 1, determine the volume that gives the company a 20% return on sales in sales peso terms and in square foot of construction. So for number 1, dito na lang natin susulat. You have here selling price 30, variable cost of 18, contribution margin of, ilan ba to? 12. So 100%, 60%, and 40%. Fixed cost would be, ilan tayo? Sabi niya kasi dito, class, return of 20%. So, income, 20%. Necessarily, therefore, this must be 20% also. Yung fixed cost percentage natin, 20%. Therefore, madali lang yung ating number 1. Bakit? May 5 million naman pala dito. 5 million total fixed cost divided by 20%. The 5 million is the fixed cost. The 20% is the fixed cost. Dividing it by its own percentage brings you back to 100%. Answer to number 1, letter A, should be 25 million pesos. In terms of square foot, madali lang, 25 million divided by 30 pesos. Final answer for letter B, 833,333 and 1/3 foot. This is your number of units in foot. Number 2, if Rogers can sell 600,000 square feet of construction in the coming year, what selling price will give a 400,000 peso profit? Di madali din lang. Parang wala na tayong hindi pa nagagawa na konsepto. So, this is just practice for you. Selling price, contribution margin, ilan ba sabi dito? Wala pa. Fixed cost, and then income. Income, 400,000 ang gusto. Tama ba? Yes, 400,000. Fixed cost is 5 million. Therefore, this one would be 5 million for 100,000. Divide this by the number of units. In number 2, gusto niya 600,000 units in square foot. So, 600,000. This one would be 9. Okay? Ano nga ba tinatanong sa number 2? What selling price? What selling price? 9 is contribution margin. So, meron ka bang variable cost? May sinabi bang binago yung variable cost? Hindi, wala. So, 18. Add back mo lang, 27. Final answer in number 2, 27 pesos. Number 3, if Rogers can sell 600,000 square feet of construction in the coming year at 30 pesos, how high could variable cost per unit rise and still allow the company to earn 280,000 profit? Di madali lang. Ano kaya kinahirap niyan? Wala. Practice lang. Alright? Fixed cost, income. Ilang gusto? 280,000. Ilan ang fixed cost? 5 million. Contribution margin, 5,280,000. Divided by 600 na naman ang sinabi. So, 600,000 is equal to 8.80. Could you please check our figures? Siyempre, minsan nagkakamali din tayo. So, 8.80 tayo dyan. Ilan yung ating variable cost per unit? Yun nga tanong sa atin eh. How high could it increase? How high could it go? Yan sabi sa atin. So, kung 8.8 yan at ang selling price mo, given the 30 pesos here, ang selling price mo 30. Therefore, 30 minus 8.8, 21.2. Dati 18 yan eh. So, 21.2 less 18 pesos. So, it can go as high as 21.20. Therefore, it can increase by 3.20. Final answer in number 3, 3.20. Number 4, if variable cost increases to 22 pesos per square foot and the company can sell 50,000 units, 500 I should say, what price will give a 280,000 profit? Di ganun pa rin. Alright? Selling price, variable cost, contribution margin. Alright, dito na lang, fixed cost. And then you have your income. Ilan daw ba gusto ulit? 280,000. 280,000. Ilan fixed cost? 5 million. Total, 5,280,000. divided by 500,000 is equal to 10.56. Could you please check? 10.56 nga ba yan? Yes. Kung 22 daw ito, according to the problem, ito, sabi 22. Pwede 22, 32.56. Final answer for number 4. IP number 7. Ben Wilson owns the company. He is trying to decide which of two alternatives, two machines to rent. He needs a machine to sand the surfaces of a picnic table that the company manufactures. The following data are related to the two alternatives. You have here hand-fed machines and automatic machine. Annual rental payments, 24,000, 48,000. Other annual fixed costs, 100,000, 120,000. Wilson expects the variable cost per table to be 44 using the hand-fed machine and 35 using the automatic machine. He also expects annual volume of about 4,000 tables. IP number 7, requirement number 1. Determine total annual cost to manufacture 4,000 units under each alternative. O di madali lang, for number 1, 4,000 units times the variable cost of 44. Yan. Total variable cost must be 176,000 under the first alternative, hand-fed, plus the fixed cost of 124,000. Dito, 124,000. Then the total cost under hand-fed must be 300,000 total. For the automatic machine naman, just the same procedure, 4,000 units times 35 pesos. Mas mababa yung variable cost niya kasi alam naman natin, ganyan pag automated, mataas yung fixed cost. Mababa yung variable cost. Common characteristic yan. 4,000 times 35. Would you please check? Is that 140,000? Yes. Fixed cost would then be 168,000 plus 168,000. So for automatic machine, our total cost must be 308,000 pesos. I hope that's correct. Could you please check? Correct. 308,000. We have satisfied requirement number 1. Next, requirement number 2. Determine the annual volume of tables at which total manufacturing cost would be the same. Ayan na. Ang pinapakompute sa atin dito ay indifference point. Alright. Regardless of whether you choose the hand-fed machines or the automatic machine, it is at that point that the total income would be the same. That the net income under the two alternatives would be the same. So how do we do that? For hand-fed, we must equate the cost of this alternative with the cost of this alternative, and we will find the indifference point. So for hand-fed, 124,000 yung total fixed cost plus yung total variable cost, which is 44 pesos times the activity or the number of units, which must be exactly equal sa 168,000 na fixed cost ni automatic machine, ito, plus the 35 pesos per activity or in number of units in this case. Find the value of your X. Sir, wala na pong value yung X ko sa akin. Wala po siyang kwenta. Manloloko. Ibang X naman yun. Okay? So, 124,000, i-transpose mo sa kabila, it becomes negative. So, deduction yun. Pa-deduct na lang. 44,000. Ano ba yan? And 44,000, of course, sa kabilang bahay naman si 35 pesos. So, 44 less 35, that would be 9x. So, we divide both sides by 9, 44 by 9, and then 9 by 9. Ultimately, x lang ang matitira dito. So, x, may value pa pala yung x mo, 4,888 and 8 over 9. Alright? Now, how do we interpret this data? First, kung ang ini-expect mo, if you expect that you are going to produce this number of units, then regardless of the option that you choose, may it be the hand-fed or the automatic machine, it would all be the same. Okay? At 4,888 and 8 over 9. 4,889 kamo na lang kasi wala namang 8 over 9 na table. So at that point, the decision would not matter. However, conclusion naman natin, if you expect to produce more than the indifference point, makinig ka kasi baka matanong sa theory naman. If you expect to produce more than the indifference point, meaning to say above 4,889, then the correct decision is to choose the option with the higher fixed cost and lower variable cost due to the function of leverage. That way, you would be able to maximize the fixed cost. You would be able to utilize the fixed cost. But if you think the production would be short of 4,889, the correct decision would be to choose the alternative with the lower fixed cost, which would be hand-fed. Okay? IP number 8. Bell Company has a 25% margin of safety. Its after-tax return on sales is 6% and its tax rate is 40%. Requirement number 1. Determine Bell's contribution margin percentage. So, yung mga ganyan, mga one-liner na problem, medyo nakakatakot yan minsan eh. So, determine Bell's contribution margin percentage. So, madali lang. Let us explain. Alright? The expected sales less your break-even point in sales gives you your margin of safety. The margin of safety is given in the problem to be 25%. The expected sales being the basis necessarily should be 100%. The break-even sales is therefore 75%. Expected sales either in units, break-even sales in either units also or pesos, units or pesos. Alright? Now, what does this mean? It means that if you work 100% level such that you reach your expected sales level, you will be obtaining 10% income. Sir, where did the 10% come from? Ang sabi po kasi dito, 6% return on sales after tax. That is 6% divided by the tax complement of 60% since 40 ang binigay dito would bring you to your before tax return on sales. Thus, the 10% figure here. If you work 75% level only, you get nothing. Okay? Zero income. Break-even point eh. So, wala. Zero. Happy face. Yan. Zero na nga. Happy face pa. Makikita mo, nag-high-low method lang tayo dito. That would be equal to how much? 10% sa taas, 25% sa baba. This one would be 40%. Now, mind you, again, we don't usually use income dun sa taas. But when we do, sabi natin, the related figure na makukumpute natin dito would be contribution margin and not related to the variable cost. Therefore, the 40% here is the answer to number 1. Contribution margin percentage, 40%. Number 2 requirement. Assuming the current sales are 120,000, determine total fixed cost. Di madali na lang because we have computed for the CM percentage already. If the sales is 120,000 times 40%, then the total CM must be 48,000. This is your total contribution margin. In that case, if we have computed the before tax return on sales to be 10% already, then 120,000 times 10% would be the profit. Ilan yun? That must be 12,000. Accordingly, total CM less total fixed cost is the profit. Total CM, therefore, less the profit would give you your total fixed cost, and it must be 36,000. Final answer, 36,000. IP number 9. Johnson Pack Company produced and sold 70,000 backpacks during the year just ended at an average price of 300 pesos per unit. Variable manufacturing costs were 120 pesos per unit and variable marketing costs 60 per unit sold. Fixed costs amounted to 5,400,000 for manufacturing and 2,160,000 for marketing. There was no year-end work-in-process inventory. Requirement number 1. Compute the company's break-even point in peso sales for the year. Break-even point is the question. First, we collect all kinds of fixed costs. First, the 5,400,000 manufacturing fixed costs. Next, the 2,160,000 marketing fixed costs for a total of 7,560,000. Our selling price is at 300 pesos. Our variable cost would be 120 plus 60. The 120 being manufacturing variable and 60 being marketing variable cost. 180 deducted from 300. This one would be 120 pesos or 40% contribution margin percentage. 7,560,000 therefore divided by 40%. Our response to number 1 should be 18,900,000. Number 2, compute the number of units required to earn a net income of 5,400,000 during the year. So for number 2, we simply employ the CM format income statement. Contribution margin less fixed cost income. Gusto daw, 5,400,000. There are no tax considerations. Our fixed cost has been computed to be 7,560,000. Contribution margin total should therefore be 12,960,000. To earn 5,400,000 income, you need 12,960,000 total contribution margin. Divide this by the 120 pesos that we have computed there to be your CM per unit. Then the number of units necessary to earn 5,400,000 should be 108,000 units. Final answer, number 2. Number 3, what is the firm's margin of safety? It is the expected sales of 300 pesos times 70,000 units of backpacks, 21 million pesos. Break-even point, also in pesos, that we have computed to be 18,900,000 in requirement number 1. Our margin of safety in pesos should be 2,100,000. Requirement number 4. The company's variable manufacturing costs are expected to increase by 10% in the beginning of the coming year. Compute the firm's break-even point in peso sales for the coming year. Very simple. This is called sensitivity analysis. They might ask you this in the theory. The problem is trying to change variables in the problem in order to check what will be the effect on the net income. Sensitivity analysis. 10% increase in the manufacturing cost. Variable manufacturing cost. So just the same, selling price 300 pesos. Variable cost will no longer be 120 because there is a 10% change on the 120 pesos. So increasing it by 20% or rather by 10% means times 1.10. That is 120 pesos times 1.10. This becomes 132. The 60 right here did not move. It is still the same. This becomes 192 pesos therefore. Contribution margin should be 108. It is 36% of the selling price. CM percentage must be 36%. Your fixed cost is at 7,560,000 still. Okay? It did not change. Divided by this time 36%. This should be how much? It must be 21 million. Of course, the break-even point increased from 18,900,000 to 21 million due to the increase in the variable cost, which ultimately translated to a lower contribution margin and contribution margin percentage. Number 5, if the company's variable manufacturing costs do increase by 10%, compute the selling price that would yield the same contribution margin ratio last year. Compute the selling price is the requirement in number 5. Alright? If you want to maintain the contribution margin ratio last year, what is the contribution margin ratio that we are trying to maintain? It is 40%. Saying that 40% should be maintained as contribution margin is just as if saying that you also want to maintain your variable cost ratio to be 60%. Okay? Our variable cost here is 180 pesos and it became 192 due to the 10% increase. So regardless of those increase in the figures, if you want to maintain the 40% CM, that means to say that the 192 should still represent 60%. Maintaining the 40 also means maintaining the 60. So dividing the 192 as it became 192 from 180, dividing the 192 by 60% should give you the 100%. It is the selling price. Final answer number 5, 320 pesos. Number 10, IP number 10.